Joe Biden does not look like he's long for this presidency. Joe Biden doesn't look like he's long for this world. Joe Biden just gave an update last night. He was giving an update on January 6th and trying to ramp up his attacks about the Republicans and Trump in January 6th. The guy gave a zombified press conference that made you think the man is not well.
You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-cop. You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-democracy. You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-American. Donald Trump lacked the courage to act. The brave women and men in blue all across this nation should never forget that.
So forget for a second that his voice is just completely different than it normally is. He sounds like Joe Biden doing one of those anonymous interviews that gangsters do, where they kind of mess up the voice. He's got the voice is all crazy. But then the weirdest part of the interview, or the press conference rather, is that he doesn't blink. That whole talk, he doesn't blink once. His eyes are super wide, pupils dilated. They're obviously pumping this guy up with something. He's got more energy than he's ever had in a kind of weird, stilted, robotic way. He wouldn't be the first Democrat president to be injected with uppers in the White House. John F. Kennedy famously had that happen to him from Dr. Feelgood, and it stands to reason that Joe Biden would need this too. Joe Biden was already 21 years old when President Kennedy was having this happen to him. The man is obviously past his prime. He's obviously not in control of himself, much less the country, and it does raise the question, who is calling the shots here? Right now, go to rockauto.com, enter Knowles in their How Did You Hear About Us box. Do you ever get frustrated when a salesman tries to sell you a product that he knows absolutely nothing about, usually just because it's the most expensive thing? You go to a restaurant, you say, what kind of wine do you recommend? They always point to the most expensive wine on the menu. You go into any kind of store, you say, what kind of shoes should I buy? They say, buy the most expensive shoes, right? Even though they're not the right shoes for you. Drives me crazy. This is one of the things I love about rockauto.com. These guys are not trying to push the shiniest or the most expensive product or the product with the most marketing behind it. They sell auto parts because it's what they know, and they sell the ones that work for you. And there's no hidden agenda here. They're not trying to push this one part over the other. You go onto rockauto.com. They've been serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. You go, they've got a super easy to navigate website. You find exactly the part you need for the make, the model of your car or truck. Same prices for pros and do-it-yourselfers. No gimmicks. Go to rockauto.com. Get the brakes, shocks, carpet, wipers, headlights, mirrors, mufflers, lug nuts, or any other part you need. rockauto.com. And then be sure to write Knowles in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. There's been a big debate over puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and all sorts of weird transgender drugs, not just for adults, but for little tiny kids. Puberty blockers, kids can go on those at 8 years old, okay? And there's been a big debate over this, and the White House, the Biden White House, where the Assistant Secretary of Health is a man who thinks that he's a woman, who is very, very in favor of injecting little tiny kids with these sorts of drugs. And the left-wing establishment in its entirety has gotten behind this transing the kids campaign. And then the conservatives said, hey, hold up. I think maybe it's not a great idea to inject tiny little kids with a bunch of chemicals to make them look more like the opposite sex. Maybe we should hold off on this a little bit until there's no way, even if you buy into transgenderism, there's no way that this can really be good for the kids. And the libs said we're anti-science and we're crazy and we're bigots and we're phobic and we're this and we're that. So the FDA earlier this month just added a warning to puberty blockers, specifically to gonadotropin-releasing hormone agonists, GnRH, but that's what we're talking about when we talk about puberty blockers. The warning indicates the risks for the little tiny kids who take these drugs. The FDA identified 6 cases in females between the ages of 5 and 12 who were taking these puberty blockers, which presented, quote, a plausible association between GnRH agonist use and pseudotumor cerebri. What are pseudotumor cerebri? That's also known as idiopathic intracranial hypertension. This means that your brain swells up. That's what's happening when we inject these little kids with the puberty blockers. In enough cases that the FDA now has to add a warning label, kids' skull, the pressure inside kids' skulls spontaneously increases. This causes brain swelling, severe headaches, nausea, double vision, and permanent vision loss. This according to the Mayo Clinic. This according to the FDA. This is what we're doing. When Richard Levine gets up there in his little skirt with his long hair and he says, for my equality, so that I can feel really good about my delusions, we need to pump little tiny confused kids full of drugs that are going to make their brains swell and make them go blind. To say nothing of the other problems that these drugs cause. Because when they get a little bit older and they go on the cross-sex hormones, those drugs are causing osteoporosis. They're causing young, otherwise would-be healthy people to become crippled, all to justify the delusions of these sick grown men who should be in counseling, if not outright institutionalized. And instead what we've done is put them in charge of health in our country. Can you imagine how sick that is? Can you imagine? Of course you can imagine it. We're living through it right now. These are the geniuses. These are the public health people. These are the people running our country doing this. And they say, trust the science. And they say, trust the Fauci. And they say, trust the Richard Levine. I don't have trust for any of these people. If an African witch doctor and shaman walked in here with a headdress and a big cauldron full of bones and bats and double toil and trouble or whatever they've got that dates back 5,000 years, I would trust that man's medical opinion much more than I would trust the medical opinion of Dr. Richard Levine or Dr. Fauci. And I think a lot of people are waking up to that fact right now. If a political regime would do this, one, they're not to be trusted when it comes to their faculties of reason. They don't know true from false. But two, it's just so freaking evil. It's so evil to do this to little kids, all to justify the delusions of mentally ill or sexually perverted grown men. It's just so wrong. You feel it in your bones. You feel it so deeply. And everyone knew this. Everyone knew, even for some of the people who maybe don't have medical degrees, which I guess is most of us. You don't need a medical degree to know that pumping kids full of these chemicals is not good for them. Okay, and now all of a sudden the white lab coats are catching up. Well, actually, maybe it isn't so good to pump little tiny kids full of all these drugs. Well, we're going to keep doing it anyway because they disregard the science and they disregard the philosophy and they disregard the natural law and they just pursue their own radical delusions. I'm glad you liked that clip. Folks, we're there. We did it. Well, it kind of depends because we're at 1 million subscribers, but then I've been talking to people this morning and they say, Michael, for whatever reason, I was unsubscribed from your channel. So I think there may be some shenanigans going on over with our friends at YouTube. Either way, we're teetering on any given moment. 999,999 or 1 million. Thank you for bringing us there. Maybe ring that bell, subscribe, make sure that we are over that threshold. Then I will get my trophy. Then YouTube will nuke my channel. And hey, it will have been fun. See you next time.